Hi there. This is a love letter meant specially for those people who are in the midst of learning some uncomfortable truths. And what I'm talking about right now is especially those people that are finding that they have to change their worldview right now because things are shifting, new things are being revealed, and some of our biases and our blind spots are having to be peeled back in order to make the world a more just place. So if you're, for example, if you're being faced with having to come to terms with some racism, whether it's internal racism or internalized shame, or it's systemic racism that's part of the systems that you're part of. I'm thinking, for example, here in Canada, we've really been having to wrestle with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission findings and what that means. I personally, as a white settler, have to wrestle with what does that mean for myself as a white settler. People who are Indigenous have to wrestle with what does that mean if I have some internalized, oppression and bias. How do I come to terms with that? And it can be many other things. It's not just racism. That's what I'm touching on here, but anything that makes you feel uncomfortable when you learn it because it might cause you shame or discomfort or whatever. It's revealing things that might hurt a little bit. So I want to offer you just some comfort and support. And this is kind of a mini workshop on some of the things that I teach. I'm Heather Platt. I'm the author of the book, The Art of Holding Space, A Practice of Love, Liberation, and Leadership. So I put a lot of thought into how to hold space for our discomfort and how to hold space so that we can grow and change. So this is a little gift for you. I hope that it will be helpful in learning to process your own uncomfortable information. So let's talk about processing and then also holding space for uncomfortable information. When you're offered new information, and that information might be cause some discomfort and cause you to have to rethink your own worldview or your biases or your prejudices or just the way you've pictured yourself in the world, what can happen is we can be thrown into cognitive dissonance. And just for a simple explanation of what cognitive dissonance is, it's the difficulty that we feel holding to seemingly contradictory ideas in our heads at the same time. And it might be, well, let's use the example because we started on this topic, the example of somebody tells you that you have said something racist. Or in the case here in Canada with Truth and Reconciliation Commission, perhaps somebody has said to you that the church that you love and belong to and find great meaning in has done harm to Indigenous children over the years. Now that's a difficult thing to hold because the other thing you're trying to hold, that we're all trying to hold, is I am a good person. So how do you hold both I'm a good person, I have done something harmful? Those two things are seemingly contradictory, and our brains want to simplify and want to chase one of those ideas out of our heads so that we feel more safe in the world. And what happens when that, and by the way, if you want to learn more on cognitive dissonance, I talk about it a little bit more in my love letter for managers and leaders, so there's a bit more of a primer there. But what happens when we get thrown into cognitive dissonance is we go into reactivity. And this is based in, you'll hear talk of the amygdala gets hijacked, the part of our brain that wants to survive. And we want to find safety and belonging and look after our primary needs. And that reactivity shows up as fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about that. Now, as we're talking about racism, for example, and I want you to know that this is about any kind of uncomfortable information, not just about racism, but in that area, you may hear talk of things like white fragility, and this might be what you think, oh, this is white fragility. Now, I have used that language quite a lot. However, I am moving away from it somewhat because I'm not sure it's necessarily moving the markers, because what happens if we use language like that can sound judgmental and critiquing people for having that reactivity is that it adds a fourth dimension to this diagram. If our reactivity is not well held and if it's judged, we go into shame brain. And once we're in shame, then we shut down, and it's really hard to learn new things and stay open-minded. And so I move away from some of that language around fragility, for example, because it's fairly weighted language. It can feel really judgmental. And we want people to stay in the conversation. We want to be able to stay and continue to learn and grow. And so thrusting people into a shame mode is not necessarily going to help us in that. So this is why I want to talk about reactivity. And reactivity is a very normal human experience when we're having to face difficult information. And so let's talk just briefly about the four aspects of this reactivity. The first one is fight. And what that looks like often is it's irritability, anger, aggression, and it's moving toward, it's advancing kind of an aggressive stance. What it feels like in your body, and this is really worth noticing how your body is engaging when you go into reactivity. It might feel like a tightened jaw, grinding teeth, tense muscles, a burning in the pit of your stomach, and tightened fists. The next one is flight, and that looks like anxiety, fear, panic, avoidance. It's a chronic worrying, especially if you don't have the option to run away from something. You're going to go into sort of a running mode in your brain, that always active in your brain. And there's perfectionism is also an aspect of flight. What it feels like in your body, you might feel restless legs, as though you need to run, but you don't know how or can't in the moment. There might be some numbness in your extremities, and there's fidgety muscles and darting eyes, and your body feels trapped. Now, I just want to say these are not originating with me. This comes out of the trauma research and trauma and stress research. Freeze, what does freeze look like? It's a stuckness, it's collapse, it's immobilization. You might be spacing out and dissociating, just sort of checking out and feeling kind of numb and not engaged. And there might be some shame involved in the freeze mode. What it feels like in your body might start to feel cold because it's shutting down. Picture an animal that is being chased and it plays dead. That's that shutting down and going cold, numb, feeling stiff, and maybe sleeping a lot. If you find yourself having to sleep far more than usual, there is a chance that you're going into this freeze mode of reactivity. The fourth one hasn't been talked about as much. It's a newer one. I like to also use the other language around tend and befriend. What that looks like is it's people pleasing. It's when you're trying to appease the abuser so that there is not more harm done. It's an avoidance of conflict, prioritizing others' needs over your own, and it's difficulty setting boundaries and saying no. What it feels like is a clenched stomach, a tight throat, and tense muscles. What happens when we go into reactivity is it diminishes our capacity. It actually freezes our brain or gets our brain stuck in the amygdala, which is the reaction center, and we can't engage the prefrontal cortex. It means we can't hear things. It's almost like there's a buzzing in our ears where we're not able to hear and process new information. And so what do we do with this, and how do we shift out of this so that we can hear what's being said and not get defensive and angry and all of the other things? I want to talk about the pause, and you've heard talk of this before, I'm sure, and some of you may have taken mindfulness training, for example. That's all really valuable stuff because the pause is kind of multifaceted, and I'm going to talk about a few different aspects of it, but really to re-engage your brain, to soothe your flooded nervous system and engage your parasympathetic nervous system, which lets you think in a higher level, more logical, reasonable way. You need to find a way to pause, to slow your body down. So the pause has 4 parts. First of all, first and foremost is breathe. This sounds a little cliched. Everybody tells you take a deep breath, but it actually works. It slows your body down. It actually lets your body know it's safe. The slower your breath, the more your body, which isn't even conscious, but it begins to think, oh, this is a safe environment. I'm okay. I'm not actually getting hurt. There's no saber-toothed tiger coming at me. So take long, slow breaths. And they say to extend the out breath longer than the in breath is actually more calming. I don't know why, I don't know the physiology of that, but this is what I've read. notice what's happening in your body. Be aware, notice, and you can even begin to evaluate, because they say the more you use your naming capacity to name, oh, okay, I'm going into freeze, I'm going into fight, flight, the more you're engaging a higher level of your brain. So actually starting to try to use words to define what you're going through is actually a really good part of this. With the in-breath, nourish yourself. With the out-breath, release the tension. The next part of this 4-part pause practice is practice. And the practice is getting your body involved. It might be a movement practice, shaking the trauma loose. They say there's a lot of value in just giving your body a good shake. It soothes your nervous system. Again, it re-engages your higher prefrontal cortex of your brain. It also completes the stress cycle. There's a really good book that called Burnout that talks about how we have to actually release that from our body, and having some movement practice will help you complete that cycle. Art making is another practice which I love. Getting messy. I especially love finger painting because it gets your hands in and engages your body in a way that just painting with a brush might not as much, because it's tactile, it's very engaged. Mindfulness, and then savor practice. This is a really important one to me, because sometimes it's just going to sit. I have a really beautiful big tree in my backyard. If I sit under my tree, I savor. I just watching the leaves move in the breeze, watching the clouds move by. There's something about that, having some reverence for the natural world, that again helps us to pause and re-engage. And then the third part of the pause practice is reflect. Once your breathing has slowed a bit, now you have an opportunity to really reflect on what's present in your body. This is when you begin to dig into naming it, to expressing it, to noticing your emotional reaction, your physical reaction. Reflect on what it was that triggered you and why. What did it make you feel like to hear those words that somebody challenged you with? Slow down so that you can respond rather than react. And what has become really important for me in this time is a journal. Keep a journal somewhere. You don't have to be an amazing writer or anything. Just sit down and write down a few thoughts. What went on in your head, your body and your mind as you were experiencing this, and how do you want to choose to respond? And then the fourth, again, another really important aspect that sometimes is overlooked when people talk about mindfulness, is the practice of reach. This is about seeking support and finding community. It might be a therapist that helps you work through this. It might be allies, advocates, accomplices, people who can sit with you and wrestle with you. Let others hold space for you. And be careful about this, I want to say, because the people who are holding space for you should not necessarily be the ones that had to challenge you about it. They shouldn't necessarily be the ones that are marginalized. If it's a case of you've been called out for racism, go look for other people like yourself who can hold space for you. Don't look for those who have been victimized by whatever has been brought up in this situation. Find connection with the natural world. Animals, if you've got pets, snuggle them. Lean into mystery, whatever your spirituality is. If you believe in a God or spirit or source, lean into that and find some connection there so that you can remind yourself that you are a good person. Again, it's that cognitive dissonance. Can you go back to, oh, I have done something that I need to make repair here, but I am actually still a good person, and I can still be a good person having done harm. And find a way to support other people. The reach part is also, now what do you turn around and how do you offer some goodness out to other people? This is how you can return to a well-resourced state. This is how you can begin to hear uncomfortable information again, to slow yourself down and be present. A few tips before I end this. First of all, practice gentle, non-judgmental self-talk. Try saying to yourself just the way you would to a small child, you're activated right now. Pause before you make the wrong choice. That kind of self-talk can be really, really helpful. It seems simplistic, but it can make the difference at that moment. Find people who can help you co-regulate when you get activated. I think co-regulation is a really important aspect to that. If you sit with somebody who has really calm energy and can just sit and hold space for you, it can actually help you calm your own body down so that you can handle what's going on. Learn to say, this is challenging to process, so I need to take a moment with it. You don't need to respond in that moment. If somebody has said that's a racist comment, you can simply say, thank you for saying that. I'm going to take a moment to process it because it's kind of challenging me and it's disrupting my belief in myself. Whatever you need to say, but take a moment, step away, and then you'll be more able to respond the way you wish. Stop beating yourself up for the parts of your learning that were missing before now, because we all have a long way to go in this. It's never too late to start. And if you get reactive every time somebody discovers a flaw in your own education, your own development and growth, then you're going to stop growing more, and you need to be open to learning more things and keep growing. I hope this has been helpful. If you want to learn more about all of this work and how to hold space, we invite you to, first of all, read my book, The Art of Holding Space, A Practice of Love, Liberation, and Leadership. And if you want to go deeper in your holding space practice, I invite you to sign up for our foundation program. If you go to our website, centerforholdingspace.com, click on certification, and then go down and click on the foundation program. It's a really rich and deep practice and learning with a beautiful international group of learners who are all deepening their practice in holding space. Take care, and I hope you have a beautiful week.